Hey Jean, I was wondering if you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your history with education.
Thanks, William. I was a classroom teacher for the Tasmanian Education Department. My first appointment was to my hometown of Queenstown, a mining town on the west coast of Tasmania. And that really affected the way in which I approached my classroom teaching.
And why was that? Why did it affect how you approach your classroom teaching?
Because I remembered actually that the students there did not have the same range of experiences as students, say, in a city school or even a regional school. When the families very rarely got holidays or went out of the town, so they were very much homebound and certain concepts they didn't have, which surprised me, like traffic lights, for instance. They didn't know what a traffic light was. And they didn't know what sheep were either.
Okay. How did people talk about how children learn, think and grow back then?
Well, within there'd be the public outside the school community, and those questions would never arise with them. It was a mining town, teachers were a class apart, and there wasn't much discussion of that at the parent level. However, in the system, Tasmanian education system changed its focus at the time I started teaching in, say, 1954, 55. They declared that instead of content or textbook focus, the focus had to be on the individual student, which changed the whole teaching approach dramatically, because you weren't teaching a subject, you were teaching people, students, human beings, and therefore the approach would be how that subject was going to fit in with the students' culture and way of thinking. And
so, when a child was struggling in your class, like falling behind, zoning out, or acting up, how did you interpret what was going on for them?
Given that situation, I would have tried to find out what way I could support the student, or perhaps change the situation so that they would be more comfortable in the classroom, that is, feel that they could relate to that environment. In fact, in one class, the students had come on from primary school. Some had been in open learning, where they sat with someone and worked at a table and they rotated and they could talk more together. The others were used to desks in rows facing the teacher. And the boys, actually they were all boys, reacted to this. They didn't settle. So I said, well, let's organise this. So I got them to pull the desks up so that half the class, the desks were back to back so that they could talk to their pal, their mate, partner. And then the others sat formally in the desks and faced the blackboard. And then they settled down to that. So I think understanding the environment that the students are in is important, and making adjustments so that it's a meaningful environment for them. That's them.
And those boys that you did change the classroom layout for, what was your understanding of their nature and state? Why did you know why you had to change the classroom for those boys? Did you understand what was going on with them?
I did understand what was going on with them because, I knew they were uncomfortable or that they were critical. This is the way I liked it before and now I've got to do this. Whether they were using it as an explanation for why they were not achieving or struggling or finding it difficult to get down to work, I don't know, but that's how I interpreted it. That it was affecting their participation.
Okay.
A boy who used to stand up and shout out things in the classroom, which was disruptive. And so it was a sort of control him and let the rest of the class go, or control the class. It was an individual in a group situation, and the way in which you integrate the individual into the group, that was what that was. But it turned out actually he was diagnosed as being autistic, so he was behaving according to the autism situation, not because he was a distractor or seeking attention. So once all that was sorted out, it just all settled down and he was okay.
And what accommodations did you make in the classroom for this child that was eventually diagnosed with autism?
He would have been, 14 by that age. So he was growing up in schoolboy terms. So that requires a respect for that, a respect for the individual and how they perceive themselves in life, that I'm growing up. I'm a big boy now. It's a long time ago, I don't know that I... But we did made allowances or acknowledging that that you understand where they are and that they are understood, so they're not misunderstood or nobody loves me, but that there isn't a gap between.
And when you acknowledged and understood this child and connected with them, how did their behaviour change?
Well, he didn't shout out anymore once that was done, and then the home side of it was the treatment he then was given, and I suppose it changes in parental behaviour as well. So that he adapted, he settled in, and there were no more issues actually.
Was there anything that remained true from the start of your career through to the end of your career, and this includes the curriculum development and syllabus development that you did, about how children learn?
Oh, that is very relevant actually, and it also was what guided me in my approach to teaching plans and lesson plans. Experience, I think is the word. Experiential learning was an important guide for me. So if somehow or other the experience in the classroom stimulated learning or curiosity, so you could set a puzzle or a scenario or what you would do in this situation.
As new theories and research came out over the years, did anything shift your approach to how you taught or thought of students?
Yes, the big one was at the beginning when the whole state edict changed to student-oriented approach. And that guided me from then on. That stayed. That it was the student who would declare, shape the way learning took place and was a participant in it, not an acquisition of knowledge, but a learning from the experiences through the learning, or the experiences if you had practical situations that they were in, which I can't quite remember at the moment, but that was the approach. And that was general, so I wasn't alone in teaching that way. That was the way the system had changed.
Do you remember? How did you handle a classroom where some children were very quick to grasp things and others needed more time or support?
That's adjusting for individual differences. So that's built in to the lesson plan. And when that happened, the time would be needed. So it would be a matter of moving around during writing tasks and just asking questions how they were going, they could do, and then working on that with them together. The other way was to actually allow students who sat together to talk to each other about what they were doing. Now that was given as a no-no. They didn't talk in class, but that seemed to me to be just a little bit too tough and unrealistic actually. So when they were surprised when they knew that they could actually speak to each other. And so they never raised their voices. It wasn't a noisy classroom, which you can't abide, but it was a working classroom.
Was there ever a time when you realised a child was emotionally overwhelmed or withdrawn? How did you handle that as a teacher?
Yes, there was a time. This was at, again, a higher secondary level. Was it a boy who was struggling with a condition? I think he had epilepsy, and he was trying to disguise that. He didn't want that to be known. And so when there's something like that, as deep as that going on. So I found out I think the issue there is, and this is more a general school policy approach, is the parent had not told the school that her son was an epileptic or had epilepsy, and therefore the teachers might have to deal with an epileptic fit during classroom time. So that was a failure of home-school relationships or information and exchange.
What do you think is the most important thing a teacher can understand about how children develop socially, emotionally, or cognitively?
Most important thing is that we're all human beings, and as a human being, a young child develops into a young adolescent, and that these are stages that they go through. So that is the background of understanding, depending on the year, age year of the cohort of students that you are teaching at any particular time. And that, I believe, is what alters or adjusts the approach to teaching. And it would also depend on the maturity and also the skills developed by the students. Now, there'd be some who were less equipped at perhaps to participate, those who'd be way ahead because of home participation or whatever, but the others would learn from them. So it was a matter of having group. I like group structures.
What is some advice that you would give to your first year teacher self?
Just stay in there and get on with it, I think. Because teaching, when I came out, was a restriction. I felt, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to stay there. And I'd made up my mind that this wasn't for me. And then I had to pull my socks up or some attitude like that and just get on with it. Not resist the changes that take place or the rules that you might have to abide, but work out how you can, work around those. Didn't say that very well.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add as some last words or notes to this interview?
No, I think I've talked enough.
Thank you for your time, Jean.
Thank you, William.